Hey folks, so there's a few things I wanted to go over and try to cover, but they don't really fit anywhere into the main series as a whole. So I figured I would do these intermission episodes every now and again, and use those episodes to sort of cover things that aren't specific to the project, but are things that are going to be useful, or at least that I've found useful, for game development as a whole. These episodes are going to be more of a ramble than anything else. There's not going to be any real visual content, and it's just really going to be me talking about things. So if that's not something that interests you, please feel free to skip over it and any future ones of these that come out. But with that out of the way, let's get things started, shall we? The first thing I want to cover in this intermission series, mini series, however you want to call it, is assets. And by that, I mean assets that you're going to be adding to your project. Now, what you see on screen right now is a slow pan of me going through my Epic Marketplace content. Last time I counted, I think I had somewhere in the region of 850-ish content packs through the Epic Marketplace. And over above those, I have another couple hundred of those I've got through things like Humble Bundle, Gumtree, things like that. So yeah, all said and done, I have well over 1,000 different asset packs from various different sources. Most of those are from the Epic giveaway. I have purchased a few, and as I mentioned, there's a few from Humble Bundle and Gumroad. Now, I'm not going to start covering Humble Bundles or Epic giveaway because there's a lot of channels out there that already cover those. But if you are interested in those sort of things, I would highly recommend checking out the channel Games from Scratch. He covers all the monthly giveaways by Epic, any decent Humble Bundles as that he sees come up. He also covers a lot of other things game dev related as well, things like changes to Visual Studio Code, Blender, all those sort of things. So it's well worth checking out and subscribing to him, in my opinion, if you haven't already. There'll be a link to his channel in the description below, and again, I do recommend go checking it out. Tons of useful content, and I've been following him for years now. Anyways, back to the actual topic I wanted to talk about. And that's going to boil down to what I like to call asset paralysis. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, at least for myself as a solo dev, it's just a situation I found myself in where you end up seeing so many assets and so many different things to choose from that you get distracted from your current task. You can't figure out what asset to use. And as you just saw, I've got thousands upon thousands of assets of all types for all different genres and art styles. And it can get very distracting. To the point I've lost count the number of hours I've spent just adding assets into a project, or just sifting through everything that gets added with an asset pack just to try and find one item I'm looking for. And then I've also found I tend to get distracted. Like, I'll be going through, we'll take the last couple of episodes since they're a good example. I'll be going through looking for like a tree or a log. And then all of a sudden I'll see, oh, here's a cool monster. I really want to add that in. That one would fit perfect for the idea I'm going for. And then you end up getting sidetracked and going on this long journey to get this monster AI up and working when you're not even ready for that yet. And you get distracted, you're wasting effort, and ultimately it's hindering the project as a whole. So obviously this is going to be down to your personality type. Like, some people aren't going to need to worry about this, but I, for one, do have to worry about this. I do suffer from ADHD. But I do also have a feeling there's going to be a fair few people out there suffering from something pretty similar. So, how do you deal with it? Well, for myself, it's simple. I don't add assets. You don't need to add a ton of assets right from the start. In the early stages of development for a project, and this covers in non-game dev stuff as well, this is any development, visually you're going to have a product that looks like garbage. It's how it is. There's a thing in the programming industry, at least, which is commonly called programmer art. And what that is we're someone who works in raw code, like we work with the numbers. We want a button to be 87 pixels wide, 27 pixels tall with a font that's size 12. That's it. And somebody who works with that raw code creates these visual elements, and those visual elements look like there's something back from like Windows 95, because that's the base framework that everyone works with. It's called MFC, Microsoft Foundation class. That's the basis. Those are the default. Now you can obviously add bells and whistles, make them have rounded corners, all this fun stuff that you see in modern technology. But anyways, that comes about from the fact you have a back-end programmer who's not specialized in UI UX, and they don't really care about how something looks to the end user. So you end up with this programmer art. They're focused on making sure it works, not that it looks pretty. And like in my professional life, I've worked on products that to this day in 2024 still look like they're from the mid 90s running on the base MFC stuff. But the products do exactly what they need to do it well, and it's simple to the point the end users can still easily navigate through anything and everything that they need. So there's no reason to give it the fancy bells and whistles. Now, on the flip side, I've also worked on some products that, for whatever reason, the product manager decided we need to make it look fancy. We need to look at it this way. And then they decided to put the functionality in, and we had to write functionality to work with the front end. And they failed. The product sucked, never went anywhere. Anyways, so how does this all relate to game development? Well, from my experience, and from a lot of other YouTube channels you'll see out there, when you're first starting off, you want to focus on making your game work at a code level. You don't want to worry about fancy visuals. That's why in things like Unity, you'll see your very first player character in most things is a capsule. There's nothing fancy. And that all comes down to the development cycle for a game. And with each of those phases, your visuals are going to change. They're going to improve. And the closer you get towards what one would call a release state, the better your visuals are going to align with your intended final version. Now, those life cycles are a big driving factor of when you should start worrying about visuals. Again, in my opinion, I'm speaking as a solo wannabe hobbyist dev. I'm just using my experience from normal software development and trying to apply that here. So, first phase is what's called the proof of concept phase. And honestly, at that state, your product, game, whatever it is going to look like utter garbage. There'll be no visual consistency in art style. You're going to have gray box functionality and assets there, like you're going to have CSG and just flat white cubes and things like that. And overall, it's going to look like somebody just grabbed a bunch of random things off the shelf and threw it together. And that's because it's exactly what a proof of concept should be. You're not wasting time on creating fancy assets. You're not wasting money on buying fancy assets. You're taking the key game elements, making sure you can get them to work the way you intend them to work, and nothing more. Really, it boils down to you're asking yourself a question that you need to try and answer, and it's, can I make this idea work? And to do that, you use what you have access to. You don't waste any additional resources, be it time or money. And as I said, proof of concept phase is going to look like utter garbage as a result of that. The code side of a proof of concept is going to be very similar. You're going to have a lot of independent components that don't really have much interaction between each other, even though they probably should be when you get towards like the later end game, the later life of the product development. But a proof of concept phase, again, it's building blocks. You're getting these pre-constructed building blocks, putting them together, seeing if it's going to work, and then you're going from there. And that's both for your visual style, which there shouldn't be one in a proof of concept, and your code level. Now, the proof of concept phase should run until you can answer the question in, well, ideally one of two ways. And that question being is, can I make this work? The ideal, like the ultimate ideal answer to that question is, yes, this is going to work, and we could turn this into a game, we could turn this into a product, we could make this successful. The flip side of that is, okay, this just is not going to work. There is too many considerations. It's too complex. These things don't mesh well together. And it really just comes down to, we just can't make this work. And that's the unfortunate worst case scenario. Now, you're going to run into the odd situation that you sort of end up in the middle of that. It's like, well, we could make this work, but it's going to be a huge amount of effort. And then ultimately, like as a solo dev, that's up to you to make the decision. If you're working for like a company, then obviously there's going to be people more than likely higher up than you that make that decision. But once you can answer that question, then you move into the next phase. Now, some people do like to call the proof of concept phase, I cannot talk yet again, the proof of concept phase pre-alpha. Personally, no, it's not pre-alpha. It is proof of concept. Pre-alpha, at least in my opinion, is the next step. So you have proof of concept, then pre-alpha, alpha, beta, release. There's 5 stages. So with that, though, the next phase, as I said, is pre-alpha. Here, at this point, you're going to want to start to actually work on things a little more focused. You're going to want to make sure you have all of the needed requirements. Like, okay, inventory system, we need to be able to expand the carry weight. We need to be able to make things adaptable. Like, now, this is an ideal world. Again, I've worked in the software industry for quite some time. Requirements are never 100% laid out right at the start, and requirements also change as a product evolves. So, but ideally, when you move into the pre-alpha phase, you're going to have as much of the requirements documented and figured out as you possibly can. Now, that doesn't mean they're locked in and they're written in stone, but you're going to have as much of that as you possibly can. And once you have those requirements, you can go back and review those building block components that you used in your proof of concept. Like, okay, so using an inventory system, for example, is this inventory module that we got off the marketplace, is it viable? Can we leverage that? Or do we need to expand on it? Or do we need to completely rewrite our own? And it's things like that, that you worry about at the start of your pre-alpha. You determine what needs to change, things like that. It's also in the pre-alpha phase where you start worrying about your visual continuity with your assets. Now, that's not to say in pre-alpha you have your finished AAA quality models and you have those in the game. You could have rough blockouts that get iterated on over time. You could have placeholders because, well, now that we've done this, we realize we need a super high detail monster that we need for our game, because the player is going to be able to run over them. I don't know. I'm coming up with spitball ideas as I go. But it's in that pre-alpha phase where you are determining everything you actually are going to need. And then from there, things start working and evolving and getting added to as you progress through the rest of your development. For my own project, I would consider I'm in that pre-alpha phase. Like, I've done all my proof of concept work and I've done everything I want there in the 10 plus times I've tried to start this project in the past. So I've done that. I know I can make it work. I want to make it work. It's a hobby project. It's not like I'm using this as a source of income or anything like that. So I don't have all of those additional factors to worry about. but I'm also not worried about visuals at this point. Like, I'm a programmer. I'm not a 3D artist. I'm going to be using asset store assets for the majority of things. So I'm also not worried about having those assets just yet, because if I don't have them, well, it means it's going to cost me money. And that's something I'll worry about down the line. But personally, I don't think you should really be worrying about visuals until at least alpha, the third phase. And the reason being for that is it's boiling down to, do you want to spend time on 3D assets that may be thrown away in the pre-alpha phase? Or do you want to be worrying about the code? Like, a good example I can think of is we've just done the harvesting tree episodes. Should I spend 2, 3, 4 hours working on a particle effect to play when that tree is harvested? Or, because right now I'm still mentally toying with the idea, do I want the tree to instantly give those logs, or do I want it to fall over and then I have to additionally harvest the felled tree, felled, is that the word? Fallen tree, to get those logs that I need? And yeah, I could potentially reuse that particle system if I change. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just harvest the tree and I'll decide I don't want anything falling because I find the physics is causing huge latency. It's not, but I'm just using it as an example. And I decide, no, you harvest the tree and they're instantly put into the player's inventory. Well, I could have wasted a bunch of time working on a particle system, or I could wait until I know I'm 100% ready to add that particle system and then spend time on it. So ultimately what I'm getting at there, and I realize I'm repeating myself a lot, is don't worry about the visuals of your product, your game, your software, whatever it is you're doing, until you know you're not going to be making drastic changes. And you can never be 100% certain with that. I've had products that I've worked on that we thought we were done. Like, we were closed, like development was done. We had locked up the repos. We weren't doing anything else other than long-term support on it. And then all of a sudden we've had to go, oh, we need to rewrite this system. So it's going to happen, but you can't predict that. Those are just things you have to roll with when it happens. But ultimately, once you've got the core code stable, yes, you're going to iterate through bugs and things like that as systems come online. But once a core section of the code is stable and ready for visual assets, then start worrying about pulling things in. Focus on the logic, be it C++, Blueprints, or whatever language you're using for your game engine or software, Java, whatever. And then worry about the visuals, at least as a developer. Now again, this doesn't work if you're working for a big team where you have 3D artists, you have programmers. Like, I have access to teams where I have UI experts, I have we don't use full stack, we have independent departments for each, so. But anyways, before I keep repeating myself time and time again, that's going to be the first topic I wanted to cover with this whole Intermission series. Yeah, as I said at the start, these topics don't really fit into the main series as a whole, but they are things that I do want to try and cover and at least talk about, just because I do think some of this information will be helpful to some people. I know there's a lot of people out there who don't have a programming background, who don't have past experiences that they can build on, and I've seen a lot of people struggle with these. But anyways, thanks for listening to my rant there, folks. Hopefully you found something useful, and I will catch you in the next episode.